I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on GBM, we're speaking with attorney and historian Benjamin Casad. He joins us to discuss his powerful book. It is called The Last True President. It is a provocative political book arguing that the United States has been in an acute constitutional crisis since at least 2020. The author lays out what he believes happened, why he says citizen sovereignty is under threat, and how lawfare, censorship, and immigration policy factor into his larger thesis. He also connects America's internal conflict to global instability, including the crisis in Ukraine. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him on TV today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Ben, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Well, thank you so much, Logan. I really appreciate it. It's thank you for that very warm welcome and introduction.
Absolutely. Well, it's well-deserved because this is a powerful book and has a lot of impact considering we live in such horribly polarized times. I can't picture America at a more polarized time, although I guess historians might be able to put their finger on this presidency or that presidency, but they didn't have social media where everybody's in your face about their hateful opinions. But let's talk about the country being in a constitutional crisis. What makes you say that, and are there markers that tell you that we're in one?
I believe we are. The 2020 election was kind of the clear signal, but there have been a lot of uses of public policy, what I refer to in the book as under color of law, with the weaponized immigration, the use of censorship, and particularly the intense lawfare that the President Trump had been subjected to. And now, a lot more is coming out about the 2020 election. I think, a year from now, even liberals will be saying, okay, yeah, the 2020 election was stolen, but that's not that big of a deal. Well, yeah, actually, it is a big deal. And we need to, I think we need to really confront this in a responsible way, because part of the reason I wrote this book was to reach out to liberals, and some, a lot of my friends are liberals and people that you really can't have political discussions with. So I thought, well, I'll put it down in writing, and they can read the book and see what they think, and they can at least understand the perspective of, those of us that want the American Republic to survive. And I think it is really an existential issue. It's at this point has become almost an existential issue. We're not quite there yet, but we just about are. And I think, if we don't have election security, we're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to enter a post-constitutional era, and how that turns out, it would certainly be, I can't imagine it not being violent. I mean, it's very scary. And it's just, we are in a very dangerous situation right now. And a lot is coming out that I think average people should really, liberals should really want to have election security. They really should. They should be saying, we need to have secure, real, auditable elections. And of course, the SAVE Act it's in Congress right now. It's in front of the Senate, or will be in a couple of weeks. And it's not going to have bipartisan support, but it should. Why shouldn't we have secure, auditable, safe, fair elections? And unfortunately, we're having to fight over that issue. Not to mention the other.
It should be fundamental that we have fair, accurate, accountable elections in this country.
Absolutely.
Instead of people arguing that illegal aliens can vote, that people shouldn't have to show ID.
Right.
You need an ID to walk into a New York City building in this era. Why
Sure.
shouldn't you have an ID to vote? So it really boggles the mind. I think a big problem is the news media. We no
Hmm.
longer have a credible news media. They're both very partisan. It's either to the
That's right.
left or to the right. We have one on the right and like five on the left. And the leftist media will say that the fact that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton appeared to be prompting the investigation into Trump on bogus charges of Russian collusion, that's not a big deal, or it's just
Hmm.
right-wing extremism. When those are credible questions, like you say, that should be explored.
Right. Absolutely. They manipulated the apparatus of government to attack uh, President Trump, then candidate Trump, while he was still running. And we now know, like in 2016, Trump announced that Biden had tapped his phones, or Obama, excuse me,
Right.
Obama had tapped his phones. And everybody said, well, that's an outrageous conspiracy. How dare he say something like that? That's so divisive and hateful and everything else. And, now 2, 3, 5 years later, they quietly admit, well, yeah, they did tap his phone, and yeah, there was fraudulent affidavits submitted to get warrants,
Mm.
but it's not that big of a deal. Let's just move on. But the problem is, it's from a lot of different sources. The manipulation of the media, government, lawfare, um, and we know from 2024, in the spring of 2024, it came out that a lot of the lawfare that's used to censor right wing or so-called right wing platforms on the internet has been coordinated, and government agencies, or probably more likely bureaucrats within those agencies, were able to effectively cooperate with private actors to coordinate lawfare
Yeah.
in an effort to censor opinions that they don't want broadcast.
Yeah.
And that's very scary. So
Yeah.
but the voting, this secure elections is the most critical um, part of it. If we can, and securing the border, if we can secure the border and secure our elections, we can potentially stabilize the situation, and hopefully more people will become better informed about how we can prevent the republic from essentially dissolving into chaos, because
Yeah.
that's what will eventually happen if we allow states to allow non-citizens to register. The key is, it's still technically illegal for non-citizens to vote,
Hmm.
and they'll always say, okay, it's illegal for non-citizens to vote, therefore there's not a problem. No, that's not really the case, because they're allowing non-citizens to register, and not even to mention fraudulent voter rolls in some states. There's different aspects of voter fraud and how it happens, but uh, the mere fact that right now non-citizens are allowed to register in some states, not every state, but those registration rolls are used in federal elections, and so
Hmm.
we have potentially non-citizens voting, and there's no way to call these votes out, or to determine, um, even though those are technically illegal votes, you
Hmm.
can't you can't really audit that election. And the solution is to not allow non-citizens to register to vote.
Right.
But that is super controversial, and of course the Democrats are going to fight that tooth and nail, because they want uh, expansive, massive voter rolls of non. And my point I'm making in the book is that means we're not going to have citizenship really anymore. We're all going to
Right.
become We're going to become global citizens, and citizen sovereignty will be eliminated ultimately from the American political process. That's what's at stake. And
Mhm.
and you know when the American people realize that, there's going to be, I think there's going to definitely be a reaction. The problem is, will it come too late? Because we have the census coming up in 2030, and that was part of the rationale of allowing an invasion of our country of 15 to 20 million illegal immigrants.
Right.
And I'm pausing this for a second on the word illegal, because what they did was the Democrats have been arguing, well, these people aren't technically illegal because we were part of a UN treaty that allowed all this migration and blah blah blah. But essentially, Biden uh, illegally expanded our domestic law, which did not necessarily allow unvetted people to enter the United States and be given parole. That's what they started calling them asylum seekers. Remember that about 10 years ago, they started calling them asylum seekers, and Biden waved a magic wand and said, well, these people aren't illegal, they're asylum seekers.
Right.
And, they give them a court date in 8 or 9 years from now, and a lot of them don't show up. I mean, some of them probably do show up or will show up, but then they don't necessarily need to be in the United States pending those applications and decisions on those
Right.
applications. But the point is, this was obviously deliberate. This was not accidental. This was a planned, deliberate attack that is an attack on the constitutional foundations of our republic. That's what it really is. I mean, it's not an accident. It's something that was very carefully planned out and is still occurring in a very planned and deliberate way. And even though Biden personally may not have been aware of what was happening, I think you could probably argue that possibly Joe Biden was not cognizant of what was happening, and he wasn't really in favor of a lot of this. The problem is he was being manipulated by people who knew exactly what they were doing, and their plan is totally inconsistent with a secure, free, solvent, sovereign American republic, and that's the problem. And the first thing we have to do is have secure elections, free and fair elections. I mean, it would be very simple. I mean, the plan, Mike Lindell has a great plan. The same thing they do in a lot of European countries. We have, a specific number of paper ballots on counterfeit proof paper. You don't mail out 30 million ballots. You have a identified number of ballots. You have the registration rolls to match the number of registered voters in your district or in your precinct. And you have same-day voting, in-person voting. People come in, they show their ID, they vote. The vote totals are totaled at the precinct level. You have members of both parties there. You take a stack of ballots with, in large precincts, it might be a few thousand, say, but it wouldn't be that many. In a lot of precincts, it'd be a few hundred votes. You tally those up and you post those results on the internet. And then those, you save the originals because they're all public documents. Then they go to a central clearinghouse, and then eventually the totals are totaled up at a central clearinghouse. But you have a record of the ballot totals at the precinct level, paper ballots, not mail-in ballots coming in a week later, 2 weeks later, or whatever, no ballot drop boxes, none of that, which a lot of that was not even legal in the 2020 election. Eventually the Supreme Court of Wisconsin decided that the ballot drop boxes there were illegal, and they were illegal in other states too. So there were a lot of manipulations of the voting process during 2020 that clearly were illegal. But unfortunately, in the post 2020 process, the certification process and all the so-called audits of those elections, there wasn't really a trial about, especially in the contested states, the 5 or 6 states where it was really a significant issue,
Hmm.
um, they never really examined, are these ballots actually votes that were
Right.
cast by lawful voters?
Right.
Yeah, they counted up the ballots, of course, were reasonably close to what the original tallies were. But that does not mean that it was a fair and verifiable and auditable election.
Right.
And that's the problem. We have to have the vote. There's no way that the vote totals should ever exceed the number of registered voters.
Exactly.
We saw
Exactly.
that phenomenon in some cases,
And
and
in 2020, when election results were brought before courts, I don't think any court actually heard a case beyond them ruling on standing.
right,
And most were dismissed on standing.
right. It was on procedural grounds, and the courts were either afraid to get involved, and unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not intervene when it could have and should have. Really, the Supreme Court, I think, probably should have, right after the election, either appointed a special master or there are provisions of federal law where something could have been done had the Supreme Court really wanted to, but they didn't want to get involved in these political issues. But my point is, we should have a fair, verifiable, trustworthy process that everyone can agree, that you can't really dispute the results. Right now, our process in a lot of places are such that you cannot really verify all of the vote totals, and that the people and that these ballots were actually cast by lawful voters.
Right. The
But
problem is, though, the left doesn't want it fair. You can come
no,
up with any system that is, unbiased, fair, accountable, but they don't want it that way.
no,
They,
that's right.
so,
That's absolutely right.
yeah,
And their whole plan is essentially, if they can get to the point where they and you see this in Latin America, we just saw it in Brazil, when they get to a point where they can take over the levers of power, take over the government. Now, it might be a little bit harder in America than it was in Brazil, but this has been going on in Latin America for a long time, where one
right,
party uh, succeeds in taking over, and they immediately attack uh, the other candidates, or like with Bolsonaro, literally being put in prison.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, if they could have done that to Trump, they would have.
well, they still want to. They still will. That's the problem. Is
Right.
that's what's at stake.
Right.
These
In the
people,
midterms, if we don't get a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate, President Trump will be impeached again, and they
right,
will put him through the rigors of all kinds of distractions to keep
right,
him from being effective.
right, absolutely, and that is the plan. They don't want the American Republic to succeed.
Right.
They don't want, and that's part of the point I make in the book too, is that this is really a struggle between globalism and nationalism.
Yeah.
And we've been following this globalist path for 30 years at least, and along come Donald Trump and says, wait a minute, I don't think we want to have the American Republic collapse. I think
Right.
we want America to be, militarily secure, solvent, strong, and and free.
Right.
And the for 30 years, the globe or more, the globalists have been saying, if America is strong and militarily and solvent and free, we're never going to have one world government. They're never going. That's not going to be possible, because these
Right.
two goals are not compatible with each other. We
Right.
can't have one world government and a strong, solvent, free, secure American republic. They're inconsistent. Even if you know formerly Western countries, like in Europe, decide uh, they're fine with having their countries taken over by massive illegal immigration and insolvency, and if that might be and I'm not even sure they are fine with that.
The
But
people aren't, maybe the leaders are, because when I
right.
go to Europe, they're begging. They're saying, please, can President Trump please come back into power? Because when America is strong, it sets a great example around the world. I was speaking to people in all over Europe, and working people, cabbies, waitresses, things like that, who feel like the Irish are being displaced in Ireland, that the
Hmm.
English are being displaced in England, that they're being
But
overrun by immigrants and migrants and asylum seekers, and they don't even recognize their countries anymore, and their cultures have been, vastly changed as well.
well, yeah, and they're right about that. That's exactly what's happened, and that was deliberate. Weaponized immigration, weaponized um, migration of people
Right.
has been part of a plan, for some time to undermine Western civilization. You don't find massive numbers of people immigrating to Iran, for example, or China,
Or China. You go to
or
China, you only see Chinese.
right,
You,
pretty
you go
much. Although,
you go to Japan, you only, for the most part. I mean,
yeah,
I was there. I was the only white guy walking around for the most part. They don't have an open immigration policy. If America doesn't lead, who will? That
right,
question has to be asked. Do you really want it to be China?
yeah,
Would the left rather see China in charge of Greenland than the United States? There's so many things and you and I are not alone. Most of the people in this country, more than half, feel the way we do. The others
hmm,
are brainwashed by MSNBC, and I don't get it because this is a great country. It is filled with freedom. It is filled with opportunity. It is filled with riches to be had for the hardworking. And it is a beacon in a dark world. If we
hmm,
don't follow the light of America, if America fails to be the leader, who else will lead? We don't want it to be any other country, in my opinion, right?
right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right, and that's the problem, and that's what's at stake, and that's why I wrote the book to get.
Yeah.
I think Robert Kennedy, and this is a good example of Robert Kennedy understands kind of what's at stake, and I think it was very controversial for him and to essentially recognize that the Democratic Party, as we've known it currently, has become a vehicle that globalists are using
Hmm.
to help accomplish the basically the destruction of the American Republic. That is their goal. That's what they're trying to do, and they have to be stopped, or we're not going to have a republic anymore.
Absolutely.
We'll have a post constitutional era. We may still have so-called elections in which the progressive globalist candidate, they'll be deciding which progressive globalist will be in, or might be a few token people. I'm talking
It'll
about
be
the
like New
future.
York City. Whoever the party says is the candidate for the Democrat Party is the
Right,
mayor of New York City. I mean,
right.
that's just how it works.
It's like
Yeah.
what happened in California.
Right.
When Democrats get in power, they immediately pass laws that basically codify unsecure election processes so that you can't have free and fair elections from that point on. And they secure their political power. That's why they engineered basically an invasion of our country, is that they don't care about the American people. They care about their own power.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
the and Democrats who don't agree with that are going to be drummed out of the party eventually. So-called, just like what happened with the pro-life Democrats. I mean,
Right.
where are the pro-life Democrats? They
Yeah.
they don't exist anymore.
They've been beat
And
out of business. We got to run, Ben. We're out of
okay,
time. The book is terrific. It's
well,
right
thank
on
you.
point. It is much needed for today's world, for America's world. The name of the book is The Last True President. It is a bold argument about legitimacy, governance, and what the author believes is a constitutional breaking point with real world consequences at home and abroad. And it's not just the author, it's this journalist as well, and lots of people in this country who feel that America is at a tipping point, and we have to be very, very careful. Ben, thanks so much for joining me here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Logan. Thanks so much.
I appreciate your time, your insight, the wonderful work you've done on this book. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford for the Global Book Network. So long for now.